My name is Chad Bauman. I teach at Butler University in the United States, and I collaborated with Professor James Panaya. Maybe raise your hand, James. So Professor James Panaya is associated with the University of Madras, and our research together focused on India and Sri Lanka. To Professor Panaya's right and to my left is Professor Reginald Reimer, our expert on Christianity in Vietnam and Laos. Moving in the other direction, we have Professor Sara Singha, who conducted research on Pakistan and Afghanistan for this project. And finally, at the end of the table, we have Professor Robert Hefner of Boston University, who is an expert on Islam and Christianity in Southeast Asia, and who, for this project, focused on Indonesia. Our session will be divided, like some of the others, into roughly 3 parts. We will hear first from Dr. Bhatti. After that, we will have some conversation among the panelists, and then in the third segment, we will engage with you, our audience. So let me move along quickly then by introducing our keynote speaker. Dr. Paul Bhatti is the former Pakistani Federal Minister of National Harmony and Minority Affairs, and currently serves as the advisor to the Prime Minister of Pakistan for Minority Affairs. He's also the chairman of the Shahbaz Bhatti Memorial Trust and the All Pakistan Minorities Alliance. Since receiving his MD from the University of Padua in Italy in 1984, Dr. Bhatti has worked as a medical doctor in various hospitals in Pakistan and Italy. Following the assassination of his brother, Shahbaz Bhatti, in 2011 by those opposed to his support for religious minorities, our guest, Dr. Paul Bhatti, left the life he had made for himself in Italy and moved to Pakistan to continue the work of his brother. He took up the role of Federal Minister of National Harmony and Minority Affairs in the Pakistani government, as well as the chairmanship of the All Pakistan Minorities Alliance. These were established by his late brother with the aim of ensuring that all religious minorities have a voice on one platform. Dr. Bhatti founded the Shahbaz Bhatti Memorial Trust in 2011 to continue his brother's legacy of promoting religious freedom, human equality, and social justice. He has been a tireless defender of minority religious rights and an opponent in particular of the misuse of Pakistan's anti-blasphemy laws. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Bhatti.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a huge honor to be here with you to share my experience. I would like to thank Professor Daniel and his partner for inviting me in this important event. I hope this meaningful event today surely challenges us to think about our fundamental right, which is central to a free, fair, and flourishing society. It is the most critical need of the moment that a growing consensus and respect for religious freedom could prove crucial in our struggle against fanaticism and a culture of violence, be it by state, extremist, or by terrorist group. Since last 2 decades, my country is facing a series of challenges like religious discrimination, persecution, sectarian violence, political instability, and terrorism. It has created a vicious circle which has trapped my whole country. Extreme poverty, especially among religious minorities, leads to slavery, loss of hope, and oppression, all of which continue to undermine a peaceful coexistence among people of diverse faith. There is a specific group with a certain ideology which actively brainwash children during their schooling. These children are brought up with the conviction to live, kill, and die on name of this ideology. This has frightened the entire world, especially Pakistan, and particularly the religious minorities. We understand behind such cruel and harsh realities, they are complex phenomena which clearly need to be identified and addressed. I believe education and the role played by the educators is the fundamental, vital element to bring effective change for the future. How and what is taught deeply influence whether children appreciate and respect ethnic and religious diversity, or whether they view religious minorities negatively as valueless fellows or enemies in their own country. If instilled early in life, these negative attitudes resist change and contribute to the disintegration of social fabric of communities, to discrimination, and finally to sectarian violence. Therefore, curriculum of schools in certain areas must be revised to promote the common values of humanity and religion, thus honoring the faith of each other. It will not only prevent innocent victims of violence, but save millions of children in the world who are also victims of this imposed ideology. I personally think that no major religion advocates hatred, violence, and discrimination. My Muslim friends often tell me that according to their teaching, killing of one human being is considered the equivalent of killing all of humanity. But thus, in some part of the world, religions are hijacked to attack, control, and create hatred and fear among innocent people, including people of diverse faith. The misuse of religion is violence of basic human rights, and killing in the name of religion is evil. In my country, blasphemy is considered a major crime and carries a capital punishment. Unfortunately, often this law is misused for personal score. We have seen killing of people, burning them alive, communities attacked, their properties were looted and burned to ash. The murder of prominent Muslim governor of Punjab, Sulaiman Taseer, happened after defending Asia Bibi, who was falsely accused of blasphemy. Then killing of Shahbaz Bhatti, the former minister of religious minorities, is another example. Apart from this, there is a little bit different case, an interesting case which have left a great impact on my life, was case of Rimsha Masih, a 14-year-old Christian girl who was mentally underdeveloped and was wrongfully accused of blasphemy by a group of malicious people who said that she burned sacred pages of Holy Quran. An entire story was fabricated where a witness said he saw her insulting pages of the Holy Quran and then burned them. This false accusation was the basis to incite a violent attack against the Christian community in the area. Their plan, as in previous cases, was to publicly announce the so-called act of violence, act of blasphemy, during Friday prayers in more than 100 major mosques in Islamabad and Rawalpindi, in order to incite anti-Christian sentiment and act of violence. After a few hours, a number of Christian people, including religious leaders, gathered in my office, fearful and asking me for help. This was the first time in my life I had to personally face this kind of challenging situation. I was deeply moved and concerned about their safety. Of course, I immediately contacted the law enforcing authorities. I began to recall similar situation when my late brother Shahbaz has faced, and he shared with me, and in my heart I asked him to how I can face this complex situation. But still, there was concern about the enormous number of worshippers attending prayer at the mosque and the high risk of militant agitators who could inflame the crowd to violent attack against the Christians. It was a huge challenge to face this situation as the head of religious minorities at that time. In my heart, I asked the help to God and to help in this situation. Simultaneously, it came in my mind to contact the chief of imams in the major mosques in Islamabad and Rawalpindi. A number of my colleagues warned me unilaterally not to contact the imams, fearing that it would exaggerate the situation. But I am sure that with the power of love and truth, I make this decision to call this imam for help. Surprisingly, each of them showed genuine concern and willingness to support me. Their collaboration and support helped quickly to diffuse a difficult, highly dangerous and tense situation that could have resulted in loss of life and widespread violence. With their help, there was no single attack on our Christian community. Rimsha case went to trial and was eventually heard at the Supreme Court. Through the help of imams, police officials, lawyers, and media, we were able to prove how she was accused falsely, and the bag of ash claimed to the back pages of the Holy Quran was forensically proven to be the leaves and branches from a tree. Finally, she was not only exonerated and released from incarceration, but her accuser, for the first time in history, was held accountable for his action and brought to justice by the Muslim people for filing a false blasphemy charge. Rimsha case set a spiritual, moral, and legal precedent for change, with evident proof how the power of interreligious dialogue and personal engagement can bring peace and change in this society in some occasions. This precedent, I believe, was birthed in the redemptive fires of love and forgiveness following the assassination of my late brother Shabazz. I am pleased to report that with the help of my dear friend, Honorable Mr. Jason Kenney and his team, Rimsha and her family are now enjoying a free and happy life in Canada. That being said, continuing atrocities, suffering, and deprivation of justice in some realities still is very high. For some, it is crisis of their faith, as it has raised the question if being Christian is indeed the right choice if one has to live in such areas. The church's structures and the institution are often weak and lack of sources to support, protect, and encourage our pupils, especially among the youth. This situation for poor and innocent victims after prolonged litigation, detentions, court expenditures, loss of livelihood, temporary and permanent displacement of their families is extremely crushing. Furthermore, the fear and the emotional cost that the people have to bear is beyond our imagination. Let me take this opportunity to share with you my personal story. The cause of religious freedom is one that has changed my family's life and mine forever. I am a surgeon by profession and have spent most of my professional practice as a missionary doctor in my own country. Further, I was supporting my late brother Shabazz and to carry on his mission after his assassination. Shabazz was my younger brother. He dedicated 28 years of his life to foster the ideal of human equality, interfaith harmony, and mutual love and forgiveness. In his struggle, he forged a path of love and forgiveness, cherishing the idea of interfaith harmony. He was loved and supported by many of his Muslim friends. He fearlessly and actively knit a network of friendship with individual souls, reaching from the poorest of poor to the highest echelons of our country's government. In doing so, he was able to make bridges among people of all faiths in my country, bettering the lives of religious minority in Islamic culture and society. Some of his achievements seems unbelievable in Pakistan, where many seeks to impose a radical philosophy. Immediately after his death, I was astonished to witness a tidal wave of deep grief and love from not only Christian but Muslim and Hindu religious leaders, Pakistani politicians, diplomats, international human rights activists. The government of Pakistan expressly recognized his efforts by awarding him one of the highest national awards, Halal-e-Shujaat. I eventually entered the political process to serve my countrymen under unexpected and extraordinary circumstances. I served as a surgeon in Pakistan for 10 years, never dreaming I would become a federal minister working on behalf of religious minorities and the underclass in Pakistan. But it had been Shahbaz's wish from very beginning. Let me tell you how I got here. When I was working as a surgeon in Pakistan, I was forced to flee the country with my family after a violent attack on my residence by extremists. One morning, I woke to find extremists trying to cut steel wires in front of my residence. This was unsettling to say the least. But for my brother, Shahbaz, it was one of the most disappointing moments in his life. He tried to convince me not to leave, but the security risk to my family made me impossible to practice the profession I so dearly love. I followed my instinct and moved to Italy, where I had received my medical and postgraduate training. In a short period of time, God blessed me. I was able to establish a new life for my family with a great deal of satisfaction. During this period, my brother and I clashed on opposite poles. He was trying to convince me to return to Pakistan because of the dire and pressing need of the community, while I was arguing with him that he should move to Europe because his very life was in danger. Shahbaz was not stranger to authentic death threats by men who despised his existence, his religion, and his work on behalf of the helpless. Looking back, I realized I was arguing from a rational and human perspective with a man whose gaze was fixed on heaven. I was begging him to leave Pakistan. He only responded me that he had surrendered his life into Jesus' hands and followed his mission until his last breath. My last conversation with him of this nature happened a few months before his assassination. Shahbaz strongly requested me to return to Pakistan. I told him that you are calling me to leave paradise for hell. He immediately replied that road leading to paradise starts in Pakistan. This was a dark and terrible time for me. My pleas with him to leave Pakistan fell on deaf ears, and I was absolutely convinced that I was doing the right thing. His determination to stop all kind of injustices and to protect the oppressed and marginalized community cost him his life. After his assassination, our world turned upside down. The news of Shahbaz's murder shocked me to the core. I was devastated, angry, all at the same time. I immediately flew to Pakistan to attend my brother's funeral. My intention was to retrieve members of my family and move them to safely in Italy or Canada and say goodbye to Pakistan forever. My conviction at that time was that Pakistan was unworthy of the services of my family. But when I landed in Islamabad, I found a heart-rending situation. There was a sea of people in attendance at his funeral from all walks of the society, Muslims, Christians, politicians, Hindus, all desperately crying for Shahbaz, saying who will take his call for peace and love. When I accompanied his body by helicopter to our native village of Kushpur, a huge crowd of young and old people overhailed me, crying and sobbing. They said they have lost their champion for freedom. It was impossible to console them. They were broken-hearted, stuck with their grief and loss of Shahbaz. He was the voice of voiceless and like a father to them who now felt orphaned. I was astounded by the lasting power of his sacrificial love, now living in the hearts of the people. I know in reality it was the love of God, and now in the midst of this vast demonstration, Many Muslim leaders were chanting, Shabazz, your mission will continue. And many of these people looked at me saying, now what? This was an extraordinary and defining moment for me. Shortly after the government of Pakistan officially offered me to take Shabazz federal minister seat, then the executive committee of his political movement, All Pakistan Minority Alliance, asked me to take charge and elected me as their chairman. I remained incensed with my government for his ability to protect my brother and stop the people behind his murder. But in this chaotic and intense moment, something began to change in my heart. I began remembering about Shabazz from his childhood until his death. I kept seeing his face, filled with love, forgiveness, and acceptance in front of me. It was transformative. There was a palpable sense of love of God strengthening him through the difficult phases of his struggle, especially the battle with an ideology wanting to impose hatred, division, and discrimination in my country. The same love of God, I think, starts strengthening me. My resentment against my government began to ebb, and slowly, perhaps with fits and starts, I began to see his murder through eyes of forgiveness. I then decided to continue his mission, realizing that thus it appears contradictory. Forgiveness and love are possibly the ultimate weapon of revenge. While reflecting on this matter, I also started to think about my mom. She had lived with Shabazz for 10 years and was deeply affected by his death. Her life with him primarily consisted of praying together and praying for him when he was away while she waited for his safe return. Even in her advanced age, she would not let her sleep until he returned home. Tragically, she was an ear witness of his murder. The assassin targeted him as he was leaving following morning prayer. He died only a few meters in front of their home. My mother heard the thunder of bullets killing my brother. Even today, it's impossible to imagine her pain. I was worried if I proposed my decision to continue mission of my brother to my mom, she would reject it, and worse, that it would increase her suffering. But as my courage increased, I gathered the nerve to speak with her. This says the tradition of our family, parental blessing and approval is held in a high regard. Initially, when I approached my mother, I was hesitant and timid, but to my amazement, my mom told me without hesitating that his mission should continue and I was the right person for this job. So then told me that it was Shabazz's will that I return to Pakistan, and now it was God's will and her wish as well. So there was no one left to argue with. Then she said something remarkable. She told me that she was not angry with the killers of my brother, and she was free from a desire for the revenge or retaliation against them. She explained me that she had forgiven the killers of my brother. Later, she reminded me that Shabazz's way of life was rooted in forgiveness, love, following the way of our Jesus Christ. I was deeply moved and encouraged. More than that, I was being transformed by the love of God. I was honored and filled with joy in assuming the legacy of my brother to continue his work full of hope, determination, and by the sheer grace of God to promote peaceful coexistence among the people of diverse faith. Let me conclude with the words of Jesus Christ from the Sermon on the Mountain. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and road is easy that leads to destruction, and there are many who take it. For the gate is narrow and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it. Thank you very much.